What is the software that will allow you to hit six figures as a freight broker?
It may not be everybody's favorite, but CRM software is going to be the software that can help you get above six figures. That's for sure.
Absolutely. And there's a ton of reasons why. But what I do want to share with you really quick, okay, at the end of this, we're going to give you a link that you can sign up. We have a special offer that you guys can have access to, but we're going to hold that off for a little bit. We'll see. What I like about SalesDash CRM, and the reason why I've kind of promoted it and talked about it and had you on here multiple times, is because there's a lot of CRMs out there. We all know, right? There's Salesforce, there's everybody and anybody has a CRM out there. There's thousands of CRMs in the marketplace. Some are more small business, some are upmarket, maybe enterprise. But the reality is that most of them are try to be a one size fits all. And what you've done is you've created a CRM that's specific for freight brokers. So give us a quick bit on why you did that and why that's better.
Yeah. So the first piece of it was, one, I actually started and casted a net too wide and was going after a multitude of different industries, not just freight. So that was my first mistake. But really, it was when I dove more into the freight space, and especially after reflecting on my experience in it, is that a lot of people, again, were sort of using a CRM more as a compliance tool than to enhance their sales process. But I think the first thing, at least in freight, is that you have two customers. You have shippers and carriers. I think that was one of the things. And then I think a second thing is that the sale is a little bit more unique compared to what a lot of CRMs are built, which is typically a lot of times built for those that sell software. But in freight, it's different because, one, you're trying to onboard the shipper, and there's the close. But then I would also say that there's many closes, in between there, because one shipper can have 4 different locations. And so there's a very large account management aspect to it. So what I've found in, working with a lot of teams is that they have to go hire somebody. First, you have to teach them what a shipper and a carrier is and what your customer is. And then on top of that, you have to try to identify how would you profile and qualify them. And so we basically take all that work out. We take a lot of the features that you would not use in those larger CRMs, and they're not there. You're not paying for features that you don't use. And it's already templated out to profile, qualify shippers, capture the lanes that they move, and then the same on the carrier side.
Yeah. And the other thing is this, here's what I've noticed. Sales managers love CRM. Salespeople hate CRMs. And the reason being is because I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that this is exactly what you talked about. They look at it more as a compliance tool. They don't use it as, they don't look at it as an enhancement tool. Plus the one size fits all approach that doesn't really customize it specific to their industry creates a little bit of friction and a little bit of distance between the broker, the salesperson, and the software, right? And I think the reason why I like what you did is because you're customizing it specific to that industry, which not only enhances the opportunity, but also maybe makes it a little bit easier and of an adoption by the actual brokers and salespeople themselves.
Of course. And a lot of times, they don't have time to build out a software custom tailored for themselves. Yeah. They got so many other things on the sales and operations side going. And then you consider some back-end stuff that some have to focus on. You don't have time to do that. So we just basically work to take all that out and then continuously make the CRM better week by week, month by month.
Yeah. If you're considering building your own software, whether it be a TMS or a CRM, or I don't care what software it is, any software, and you're a broker, I'm going to give you a bit of advice. Don't do it. And let me tell you why. I have invested millions. And when I say millions, it's more than $1 million, but less than probably 5 million of hard-earned money into software. And I did that 2 reasons. One, because at the time that I started developing it, there wasn't a lot of good software because this is back in like 2003. But secondly, it became like a black hole, and it became very difficult to reverse out of that, right? So it was very expensive, very time consuming. And the reality is now there is a plethora of software. For anything you need, there's software. I don't care if you need a software to remind you to scratch your ear in the morning when you wake up. There's software out there that'll do that for you, crazy enough. But it's very inexpensive. It's very readily available. And it's very, very good and probably significantly better than you can build yourself. So that's the reason why I'm a big believer in SaaS software. That's the reason why, I've promoted different TMS software and different lead generation software and different CRMs. So listen, I'm going to throw this up on the screen because I think it's important. You guys, Josh has been good enough. And what we're going to offer you guys as a part of this, if you want, is you guys can actually sign up for a free 14-day trial for Josh's software, his CRM. We're going to talk a lot about that here and integrate some of that into the tips that we're going to talk about here on how to increase sales. But I want to put this up here because I think it's important that you guys understand it's a free trial. If you're not happy after the first 14 days, just cancel, and you won't be charged. There won't be any issues. You're not going to get pestered. You're not going to get, there's nothing to it. You should be able to try this out very painlessly. And I think you'll really enjoy it because a lot of the things that we've talked about up to this point. So rather than me continue rambling, why don't you dive into those 7 tips that you're going to share on how to increase your sales by using a CRM?
For sure. One other thing to add, it's risk-free, so no credit cards required. So you just go sign up, try it out. If you like it, great. If you don't, you can keep it moving.
Oh, I love it. No credit card required, guys. You guys can sign up, zero friction, right? And then if you like it, you can always upgrade, add your credit card, and then have a subscription going into the future. That's amazing. That's a great offer because not a lot of software does that.
Yeah, we want people to test it out, and if they feel if it works for them, they could do a monthly or annual subscription. If not, again, you can stay with the spreadsheets or whatever you were using before. So, so. We'll get into these 7 tips. I'm going to just call them 7 fundamentals. So these are things that I think are simple things that you can tweak and really be thinking about when you're managing a leads pipeline, just a bunch of different shipper leads that you have. And so the first one is going to be pretty simple, but I will say I commonly come across this, and it is to limit the amount of accounts that you have in your name. So there are a lot of lead generation tools that are out there that can provide you a multitude of different shipper leads. ZoomInfo is very popular, Apollo.io, Seamless.ai, all these are very popular. Some of them you can do a free trial and they can be really cost effective. ZoomInfo, maybe not as much, but with this, you can go and get 300, 500, 1,000 leads. The biggest thing that you want to consider is to try to go get the leads that make the most sense for you to target, but really think about what you can actually do within your own willpower. How many can you actually follow up with within a given time period? And I don't think the name of the game is how many you have. It's actually how can you make sure you're giving yourself enough chances at bat? Because anybody that's cold called shippers or emailed, it requires multiple different touch points. I think it should get into the double digits before you move on to somebody. And if you have, I would say 200 plus, it's really hard to maintain those follow-ups to make sure that you're building the familiarity with your name and your company and what you do. So just be sure to limit the number of accounts that you have in your name. My recommendation would be 100 to 200.
Yeah, well, and I agree with you on that. And here's the reason why, because when I was acting as a sales manager for the brokers and salespeople that worked for me, we obviously had a CRM. And what I noticed was some of the people would have 1,000 different accounts in their name, but they'd literally only be touching 10% of those accounts on a regular basis. And Correct. The problem is that they felt like they had more opportunity by having more leads. But the problem is that bigger is not always better. More is not always better, right? You need to have something that you can effectively manage and you can effectively touch, right? So I agree. Limiting those accounts is going to make your follow-up and make your entire process more powerful, because it's kind of like you're going to have leads coming in, you're going to have leads going out, you're going to have leads coming in, you're going to have leads going out. Exactly. And if you set that type of protocol and that type of fundamental, like Josh is saying, I think it's going to serve you well. So yeah, that's number 1. Let's talk about number 2.
So the second one is really to just make sure that your leads fit your target market and your ideal customer profile or your ideal shipper profile. So I think one of the simplest things that you can do is take a look at where you're strongest in operations right now with your carrier network. Is there commonalities in the location with commodities, products that you ship, the pain points that the shippers that you work with have? You want to consider those things as your filters so that when you are using a lead generation tool or whatever you may be doing to go get your shipper leads, you can be a lot more focused. Because if you're calling on a bunch of shippers that are either too small or maybe even just too large for what you want to focus on, at that point, that's not really time well spent in your sales efforts.
Yeah. So, man, again, another one that's being very specific with who you target. I'm a big believer in riches are in niches, right? And I preach that all the time. But not only do you niche down into, say, for example, the steel industry or the bottled beverage industry or the produce industry, you should be niching down even further with your CRM based on maybe geography, based on maybe their size, based, their number of employees or revenue, or a variety. Maybe they do import or export. There's different ways that you can kind of niche people down even further, prospects down further. And the more you're able to niche down, obviously, there's that old adage, right? I had a post about it on LinkedIn today. The reason why niches are so powerful is because it's impossible to boil the ocean, right? But if you bring that down into a much smaller base, a cup of coffee, right? It's pretty easy to throw that in the microwave and that thing will be boiling in 60 seconds. So that's what you need to think about when you're doing, the leads, is making sure that they meet your specific ideal customer profile. And that's perfect. I love it.
That boil the ocean analogy. That's the one right there.
Yeah, that's the one, right? It's impossible to boil the ocean, right? But it's
Yeah.
easy. Take that cup of coffee. But the problem is most people think, well, yeah, but if I narrow it down, I'm not going to have a lot of opportunities. No, you're wrong. It's the exact opposite. You're focused. And the way you can speak to them more intelligently and at a different level adds a whole new component to your sales conversations. And then obviously, by narrowing down, you're going to be a lot more focused on those leads in your CRM, which is what's the whole objective is. So number 3.
Agreed. So number 3 is going to be around follow-up cadences. And there may be some people that disagree with this, but I think for anybody that's cold called shippers and B2B sales, I think this is just the truth. But my recommendation here is with follow-up cadences is to sort of almost think of it like chess. And what I mean by this is there's a lot of people that I'll talk to, and particularly sales managers, that have this vision and this idea that we should always follow this specific follow-up cadence for every single lead. And for anybody that's made the calls, is that you can't really do that when you're actually cold calling shippers because of the results of the calls. Did you get to the gatekeeper? Did you actually get to the decision maker? Did you get to somebody else that they're pointing you in the direction of the decision maker? Do you need to go to corporate? There's so many little things that happen. Are they on vacation? And so it immediately just very quickly gets you off what your set scheduled cadence is. And so my biggest recommendation, I think, is with your follow-ups is to be thinking of it from the tone and energy that you're actually hearing from the shipper. Sometimes it's good, and a lot of times it's going to be negative, right? Because they may be getting the calls all the time. But be thinking about your follow-ups of, based on that, should I call them back again tomorrow? Should I call them hours later? Should I call them and maybe push this one back a few days? Should I push it back 2 weeks and maybe just give it some breathing room? Think about it just based on the amount of touch points that you've had, the methods of communication between calls, emails, maybe even social like LinkedIn and those things. And strategically, I would say do follow-ups in bursts where you're actually reaching out to them more in a shorter period of time to try to make sure you're building that familiarity with your name, company name, what you do, your phone number. And then also at times space it out. So the CRM is great because it also helps you see what you've attempted, how frequently, how often, and the times of day that you've tried to reach out to them.
Yeah, the cool part is he just hit the nail on the head. The history. You have a logged historical record of all of your outreach. I don't care if it's an email. I don't care if it's face-to-face. I don't care if it's over the phone or LinkedIn. You can have a historical record of that and knowing when and where and what happened, right? So that sales cadence, just to kind of add a different layer to this is, I look at sales cadence, having a defined sales cadence more as a way to start your dialogue and to get that dialogue going. And then from there, it's going to be like algebra, right? It's if this, then that, right? Then we have to make adjustments based upon what happens, right? So I'm a big believer in having a defined sales cadence, because one of the biggest problems I see with brokers is they only want to send email, or they only want to do cold calls, right? Mm-hmm. They don't want to do both. They don't have a cadence that integrates both. They definitely very rarely integrate LinkedIn, and virtually none of them go face to face, right? But if you can put those 4 different strategies, those 4 different techniques into play, number one, you're going to increase the number of conversations you're having, right? Which is we're in a contact sport, right? So we got to start those dialogues, good, bad, or indifferent, and then from there we can adjust. So no, I like that. I think that's perfect.
Contact sport. Never thought about it like that.
Contact sport, baby. Number 4.
So this one may hit home for some people, especially when it comes to, hey, this is my sales process. But removing the stages, labels, statuses, whatever you want to say, of cold, warm, and hot, and implementing an actual sales process that's aligned with freight. So this may be the one that I may talk about the longest, but I'll try to keep it pretty short and succinct. So cold, warm, and hot, it doesn't necessarily help you actually say, hey, why are they cold? Why are they warm? Why are they hot? And all I'm saying is, from a sales process standpoint, this really helped me out. I would say in freight brokerage also helped me out in Tesla, just in regards to, working with customers and selling cars, is you want to know what the next steps are, right? right? If somebody's not a customer, there's reasons why they aren't a customer. So for example, the 4 stages that we have in SalesDash when you first sign up for a free trial are going to be stage number 1, pains, needs, challenges as stage number 2, pricing as stage number 3, and then setup paperwork as stage number 4. So what would this typically look like? Discovery would be, do they ship the equipment types and the modes that you guys specialize in service in? Do you guys know who the decision maker is that onboards brokers and carriers? And do they ship reasonable volume? Like, should you actually consider like still calling them and emailing them? That piece is really important, obviously. And if they actually work with brokers and carriers, and if they're not, vendor or customer routed. So that would be the step 1. Like, should you continue to keep calling and emailing them based on those factors? Like, are you well lined up with them and the services you provide, and vice versa for them? Second one would be pains, needs, and challenges. What challenge are they having, and what is the overall purpose they need to onboard you as a broker or carrier? What challenge are you solving for them? What solution are you providing? Is there something there? The third is going to be price. You obviously have to price out lanes, provide some different quotes to make sure your pricing lines up. And then the fourth would be set up paperwork, where you typically would either send over your credit app, or they would send you a contract for you to review and get signed up. So those would be actual steps that you would take in the sales process from start to finish. And it's not that it's going to go that way every single time. Sometimes people send over their paperwork first thing, right? But you still want to figure out if they're actually the right fit, because you could possibly be wasting time if you're not the right fit based on the modes, the equipment types, the volume, all that kind of stuff. So just things to consider. But cold, warm, hot is just like not necessarily going to help you get into the right mental framework to say, okay, I have this customer in this area. What do I need to do next? And why are they not currently an onboarded shipper at this time?
Yeah, and the cold, warm, hot is kind of that a CRM trying to be a one size fits all solution, right? That's what they're trying to do. It's very hard to customize those stages unless you understand the industry, because those stages are sometimes a little bit different, right? And so, yeah, that cold, warm, hot is kind of like that generic version. And what Josh is doing with SalesDash is he's customizing those to allow you to, number one, filter and sort, aggregate those into different categories so that you can follow up and act accordingly moving forward with all your activity. But secondly, so that you have the ability to kind of micromanage your pipeline in a way that's most effective to actually acquire the customer, right? And because that's where you can filter and find things much easier, right? You saw some of the ways he broke those things down. I mean, that makes it a no-brainer on what the next step is, as opposed to, well, it's a warm lead. What do I do next?
What does warm mean?
Yeah, what does warm mean and what's next, right? So I love that. I think that's perfect.
So the fifth is going to be really focusing on account management. This is the easiest way that you can grow revenue, because you're already onboarded with these customers. So of course you can always go and get new customers, but the easiest way to grow your revenue today is to figure out, hey, how can you help those that you're already onboarded with more than you are currently today? Do they have other locations? Do they have other contacts that award and tender out their own freight uniquely throughout the company, another division, another location, or facility? I think it's very simple and simply put, but SalesDash as a CRM allows you to store as many contacts as you need within an account page. Same thing, you're going to see that history and the activity timeline. Who have you reached out to, not reached out to? And you want to keep those other contacts warm, because if they also have freight, I don't know what phrase everybody uses, and the brokerages I was at is more so, increasing your wallet share in terms of, hey, if you know that they move 50 loads a month and you only move 2, 3, 4, 5, you have more wallet share to increase. So always think about that with the customers you're currently working with, and how can you be trying to basically increase your load count with them?
One of the fastest ways to grow as a freight broker is you're dealing with their facility in Buffalo, and then all of a sudden now you start working in their facility out of Boston, and then you start working in their facility out of Atlanta, and they all have different logistics managers and transportation managers and different needs and challenges and problems. And you just can literally double, triple your sales if you take that type of strategy, as long as you can deliver on the back end. But I want to add a layer to that, which you didn't really hit on, which I think is critically important, and that is customer retention. So what happens is what you will find, the way to become stickier and more valuable to a customer in any industry is to provide more value and to have more relationships. So if you're doing business with a shipper out of 5 locations, and you've got 5 or 6 or 8 or 10 different contacts within that organization that you're working with, it makes you stickier and more valuable and more difficult to get rid of than the broker that's only dealing with one person at one location. So I teach, as a customer retention strategy, you should have at least 3 levels and 3 layers of relationship to try to retain those clients. And if you have that, if one person turns over, then all of a sudden now you have those other relationships to fall back on. Guess where all that's managed? Guess where all that data is managed? Guess where those relationships are managed from? Ding, 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 the CRM, right?
CRM.
That's why you need a CRM.
Moving on to number 6. This one is super, super simple and straightforward. You can't exactly do it within a spreadsheet unless you're tracking dates, but it's to filter by last activity date. So if you get stuck in saying, hey, who do I need to call today? And if you're not maybe the best with follow-up tasks, one of the easiest things you can do within CRMs is to filter by last activity date. If it's blank, you've never reached out to them before, so those are fresh leads. But what that's going to do is just basically throw out the date to the furthest out, so that way you can basically make sure that you're keeping all the shipper leads that you have in your name as warm as possible. Super simple, just ascending or descending order, filter by last activity date.
Yeah, super simple. But I mean, without it, where do you go? I mean, you have to be able to know when you talk to somebody last, but that simplicity is sometimes the easiest way to move the process forward and to actually start more conversations. Because again, if you don't have that, it doesn't help you to talk to the same 10 or 20 prospects over and over again and have everybody else lost in the weeds somewhere. So no, I think that's important, but again, very simple.
And the last one is just going to be number 7 here, is talking about new leads in and disqualifying out. So what I mean by this is, and Dennis, you actually were alluding to this exact thing earlier on, of making sure like, hey, you have new leads, but you're also disqualifying. So number 1, I think when people get into systems or with spreadsheets or just get kind of ingrained in the day in and day out, it's really easy to just be calling the same people over and over again, right? But if you don't have a flow from like top of funnel, new people that you're calling, people that you're actually disqualifying out, one, you always want new leads to be calling because timing is so important when it comes to sales. But 2, you also, disqualifying is a large part of the sales process. If somebody, again, like doesn't work with brokers, or if somebody is strictly vendor customer routed, or if their volume is one shipment every 6 months, those are people that you probably are going to be moving out because the time may not be well worth spent in reaching out. And I know, sometimes there's always like easy objections that they can give you to just try to push you off the phone. But you should have this constant flow of new leads that you're talking to and ones that you're actually moving out. And that's when you know that you're asking the right questions, and learning that information is if you are asking those open-ended questions to figure out, hey, is this somebody that I know that I can service well? And do they also meet the characteristics, kind of like what we were talking about earlier, in the qualifying process for me to continue to call and email to try to get onboarded as a broker, agent, carrier?
Yeah, it's really simple, guys. If you have the bandwidth to manage this many contacts, okay? If you have the bandwidth, time, energy, resources to manage this many contacts, whatever it is. And what happens is you continue talking to the same people over and over again that aren't qualified. That's costing you time and money with people you could be talking with that fit your proposition better, that fit your funnel better, that fit your niche better, that you can service better. So you got to think about it as a lead. Every time you have 10 new leads coming in, you should have 10 new leads going out. Okay. So, and within reason, I mean, you want to try to keep a fairly consistent level. And what that will do is that will allow you to distribute your bandwidth to the people that are the most qualified and the most need.
Correct.
Because remember, no need equals no sale, right? So we can just beat a dead horse over the head 100 times. It's not going to necessarily make them buy from us. And again, I know there's sometimes you have long-term follow-up if you have good rapport, or maybe there's some potential need down the road. And I'm not saying disqualify good leads, but we all can kind of feel the difference between a good lead and a bad lead. So, make room, get rid of the dead wood and make room for some fresh new leads.
Absolutely.
Perfect. All right, listen, those are great tips, guys. If you guys like the tips, hit me up in the comments. Which one of those 7 tips do you think made the most sense to you? Also, let me know, have you ever signed up for a CRM, or maybe did you sign up for the trial based on this live? Love to hear your feedback. Sales is hard enough. Getting shippers is hard enough. Getting customers is hard enough. But without a CRM, it's ridiculously hard. Okay? It's exponentially harder. And that's the reason why the title of this training was, you won't hit 6 figures without this freight broker software. And I truly believe that you will not. You are a complete anomaly if you're earning 6 figures as a freight broker and you do not have a good CRM. So, hey, listen, thank you so much. Thank you for the feedback, everybody. Josh, thank you for being here.